On the show today is Kyle Burkett. He's the managing director of asset management for Nicol Investment Company. He's overseeing the performance of all of the multifamily investments for the company. Additionally, he works with the executive teams to define the company's growth strategy, as well as directs all the property operations, the capital expenditures, all the renovations, redevelopment programs. So we're excited to talk to Kyle today. Kyle, welcome in.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
Pleasure to be
just
here.
love that you took the time to share the time around what we're talking about today, which is really virtual leasing, AI, and all the things among that. But before we dive into that conversation, I'd love for you to give our listeners and viewers a sense of what you're up to in Nashville, and give us an idea of what your portfolio looks like and the work that you do.
Sure. So I've been in multifamily since I was 19 as a leasing consultant in student housing. So I grew up in this business. I've been with Nickel for 5 years now. I head up asset management and operations. So I make sure that the investments that we deploy capital to meet the expectations as best as possible. Property operations, leasing performance, CapEx, et cetera. As far as what we're doing, we own a diverse portfolio, primarily multifamily across the Southeast United States and Ohio. We have industrial, self-storage. We owned a hotel at one point, and then we have retail and senior. So I make sure all of that makes money effectively. In Nashville, we've got 600 units under development. We develop internally, which is exciting, and then also own a couple of projects. We recently had a couple of big dispositions in Nashville as well. So very active here in our headquarters here.
Yeah, that's exciting. What are you most excited about right now in multifamily? I mean, you've got these developments going on. You have a big picture view of things. What are you excited about?
You know, the post-COVID environment is keeping everyone on our toes and how we react to ever-changing uh, cost structure from a development side. Lumber and cost of goods continue to rise. Conversely, rents are growing today at a higher rate than we have ever seen in my career. So we're seeing double digit rent growth in almost all of our markets, which is exciting. But, when does that end? How long do we have to enjoy this kind of fruit? And what does that do for affordability across our markets?
Yeah, that is a challenge. And one of those things around affordability is being efficient in operations, thinking about getting to the yield. I mean, investors should still get to the yield, right? I mean, they're taking the risk, and they're finding other ways to do that. All right, what other ways are you guys using, sort of strategies to get to more efficiency in the business?
Well, that was a big AI initiative for us. So we're struggling with staffing. Labor is one of the most difficult things to keep under control. Our costs for labor, payroll are skyrocketing. Adversely, post COVID, there is a push for flexible working, different kinds of work hours. Like the employee base has a different perspective than your traditional kind of 9 to 5. And so, as it pertains to this conversation, we launched AI across our entire multifamily portfolio a little over a year ago, actually. Um, Objectives being one, increase our customer service, two, be more agile. We want to retain talent. People want days off. My portfolio is closed unless we're in lease up on Sundays. I find that important. Work-life balance is important to the employee base that we try and attract. And so how can we still get a working millennial who needs to know availability at 9 o'clock at night or at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon and retain talent? And so it's like, what are our options? And then we launched AI. From an expense perspective, it's incredibly cheaper than an additional employee. It gives our sites the ability to be flexible and have coverage without someone physically present. And then pre, during, and post COVID, AI helps with virtual tours and question marks when we would have exposure in one of our offices and have to shut it down for 2 weeks. And so it has been such an incredible tool to keep us driving occupancy and driving rents and really providing the best customer experience possible. So that's, in a nutshell, why we decided to launch it.
Yeah. So AI is a big category. What tool are we talking about here?
The chatbot, and then
Okay.
also the virtual leasing agent.
Okay.
So we
And
partner with a group called Leasehawk, and that integrates with our PM systems. But right when you hit our websites, you are greeted by a virtual leasing agent who can do almost anything, ask specific questions about amenities, give availability, schedule tours. We own both urban and suburban multifamily. So sometimes our tour path is a 30 to 45-minute long experience. And so when someone calls our front office and our leasing consultant is not there, that's a missed opportunity. And how do we, without adding payroll, never miss a phone call? And so that's really one of the most exciting things about AI that we've come to really love.
have you guys done the math on that? Like, I mean, you just
Oh
start to
yeah,
do it in your
300 bucks a
head.
month. AI is $300 a month. You got a $22 an hour leasing consultant at 29% burden times 12. You mentioned yield earlier. I mean, with cap rate compression in every tier one and tier two market, the ability for us to get the IRR that we're looking for, you must turn to operations. I mean, expense control has never been more important because um, we have NOI expectations, in our investor group and who participates in our equity deployment. This is a business. And so when we look for creative ways to drive down our most expensive cost buckets, payroll being the largest, one of the largest outside of utilities, it's like, how can we maintain excellent customer service and not increase payroll? And so you introduce a product like, a leasing agent or AI chatbot, and you're able to never miss a phone call and, $300 a month versus a $45,000 a year employee is a no brainer.
Yeah. So what about you and the mindset around this approach? Is it the way your portfolio is structured that made you see all of this? Like, tell me about what it was like before and when you got over the due diligence period to put this into action.
Um, when McDonald's started hitting the news with their robot order takers years ago because of increased wages and trying to drive profitability, it's like, man, how is this going to affect multifamily? Right. And so I think it's important for people in decision making roles to attend conferences surrounding technology. Our end user, an aging millennial, grew up with an iPhone and iPad, prefers text messages versus a phone call. Additionally, on our urban product, our baby boomer renter makes up a significant renter pool, and they prefer to speak to someone live. And so, how do we balance making sure that we take care of our customers? And so it was like, on some of our smaller projects, sub 200 unit multifamily deals, if you follow the traditional 1 per 100 business model, you have to close on Saturday and Sunday because you can't retain talent. So I have people quitting because they're working too much or working every weekend. And yet that's when people are coming to tour apartments. So we continue to run into situations where our guests were not being taken care of. We were missing traffic, missing phone calls, occupancy would drop, and then we would have turnover. So we turned to technology to supplement, and help. And that really was a fact finding mission for us. We don't self manage, we use third party managers like RAM, Rangewater, and Village Green across our portfolio. And so we pushed that, issue back onto them and said, hey, what are you guys using? You guys have 40,000 units across your portfolio. What are you seeing that's successful? Because adding expenses continuously is just not, you can't continue to just increase payroll expenses. It just doesn't work. There has to be some type of like give and take.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, you mentioned the pressure of just getting to the yield and driving NOI, all the things that we have to do, and the horizon of knowing like the rent increase, raising rents to get there is at some point there needs to be a plan.
Yeah.
You don't want to depend on that. It's nice to have that healthy growth. Um, but I like the way that you think about this because there's a lot of conversations around where technology fits into, and people are cautious in even how they approach the conversation around technology innovating the way that we work, and what will it do with jobs? Is it displacing the leasing agent? Is it actually making life better for it? It sounds like you're creating a situation where you're not looking at it like that. You're looking at it like you're solving a talent problem, also creating a more flexible work experience, and also meeting the demands of the business, right? And so it's the world of the executives that we all grew up in to get to the point of success, to have a portfolio. What got us here is very different. What we teach and what
Sure.
we know, that world post COVID doesn't exist anymore, at
That's
least
right.
not like it used to. And so I'm interested in seeing what your teams are saying about these shifts, and how they're responding to it, because I can obviously see you see the big picture on that stuff.
Well, there was a fear at first: is a artificial intelligent robot going to take the place of a leasing consultant? And so when it first became something that was a hot topic, everyone's thinking, man, is this going to just completely replace the human experience? And although we are a sales office, the primary goal of a leasing office is to sell and rent apartments. We do provide a customer service. And for Class A urban markets, there is an expectation of convenience and customer service in a post sale environment. So great, you get John and Jane Doe to move in, you have a beautiful building, world class amenities, excellent construction, and a great location. But then you have a significant amount of duties that a leasing consultant, assistant manager, and property manager have to do. I mean, programming. Think about the wave of packages, which is another way we're using technology in multifamily. Like, who's going to accept these? How do we provide a good end user experience? These human beings live with us for 12, 24 months. They need a human to come down and speak to and interact with. That also encourages retention. And so I don't see AI as a replacement for a leasing consultant. I think it is a supplemental tool to help provide better work-life balance, a more user-friendly experience, and improves the speed of my business. If I lose the attention of a prospect, and I'm a statistics person, right? So let's say 10 people call my office. If I miss 2 phone calls a week for 52 weeks, think about the lead to lease model, right? How many phone calls turns into tours turns into leases, assuming a 30% closing ratio. And if you miss that many phone calls over an entire 12-month period on a 250 unit multifamily deal, you're losing out on a significant amount of revenue. Furthermore, we have a we want it now renter. There is no wait for a response. Leave me a message. I mean, I can't tell you the last time I've formally left a voicemail, right? It's just not what our renter pool does. They want to text you. They want to know right now what your availability is because they have a decision to be made today. Going back to my 1 per 100 business model, right? Because that's how we underwrite a new development. Well, how do I answer the phone on site if COVID is in my office, if someone's on vacation, or if we're busy on a Saturday? And so we pulled data from one of our projects, several of our projects, as we evaluated an AI partnership. And I had, 5 tours booked on a Saturday with 1 leasing consultant. Well, our phones went unanswered all day. And so you multiply that times 10,000 units every Saturday, how much revenue are we missing?
Mm.
And so we decided that we had to do something, right? And so then we went down the path of discovering what was necessary and what worked and what our partners thought was helpful.
And
So that's really our driver for it.
yeah,
We see it
no,
as a revenue generator.
no, absolutely. And speaking of those trends, do you believe, I mean, obviously, COVID, post COVID helped with the customer expectations. You mentioned McDonald's earlier. There's always those products like even the Amazons of the world, um, Apple stores, and how they transact. They still have great people working there, but we
Yeah.
really don't need them to buy the product.
No,
They're there to
but that
help you.
experience is so short, right? So think about that experience when you go in and buy AirPods, which are one of my favorite Apple products. That experience is incredibly quick. It's a true transaction. I would argue it's more of a transaction than an experience. I would also argue that if you're going to charge $2.50 rent in downtown Nashville or wherever, Cincinnati, some of the markets that we operate in, there is a level of experience as well. Think about if you go to a nice steakhouse, there should be valet out front. There's a human experience to a longer transaction that has more. It's more expensive. You know what I mean? So you can't have one without the other, and then you have to keep costs in mind, right? So it made the most sense for us.
Yeah, and so what does it say to the customer when they experience something like this modern way of interacting with availability and really the property information to get to the conversation to move in? What does that feel like for the resident?
Well, we can only go off of the data that the software produces. Okay. So you talk about KPIs of the interest, right? How long are they spending on our website? Data suggests the longer that a prospect spends on your website, the more likely they are to lease. You have to get past this like 90-second mark that is particularly important. We then review analytics from Google, which are particularly important, and then we listen to our marketing partners. This software keeps people engaged, but it engages them immediately. They start getting answers to their questions immediately. Do you have a two-bedroom? Yes. I mean, our little like Lisa will pop up and tell you about our dog park and send you a virtual link. And so our resident experience is getting, everything that they need right away. And then it books an appointment, which I think is just the coolest thing, right? It will automatically push that piece of traffic into our CRM so that when our leasing consultant comes back from her tour, his tour, they're able to immediately follow up with this individual. But now you have an informed renter, right? And so, you used to get in a car and drive around on a Saturday and look at 10 apartment complexes. And now data suggests when a renter contacts you, they've done all the research that they need via the web and have chosen, you're one of three apartment complexes that they're considering. So you have a 33% chance of getting this right when they contact you. And that's pretty good. But if you don't answer, well, they'll call someone else.
Right.
I think convenience, I laugh. It's like, what are the most important things to a renter today? Well, real estate is location, right? I think that's always going to be the number one amenity. And then our friends at NAA say fast, reliable internet is number two. I'm like, okay, cool. And then I would argue that convenience is the third. You have to make doing business so convenient for a Class A renter because there is other options, right? You want to live in downtown Nashville, there are apartments everywhere. And so I think that as we continue to adjust to what our renters' needs are, technology must be involved. You look at other industries like McDonald's, people like me say, how can I integrate what they think is a good idea, a multi-billion-dollar organization, into what we do and increase retention, increase customer service. Our Aura scores are incredibly important. We partner with Jay Turner. It's like technology had to follow suit. I mean, you just have to.
Yeah. And those that are not taking action and just comfortable doing what they've always done, what do you say to someone on the fence?
Man, I would love to buy their property because I can increase their NOI, like sell us your deal. I love finding people who I think, are not accepting efficiency and technology because it has done such good things for our portfolio. Prior to my role here, I was the director of real estate for Greystar. Greystar has a whole technology division. And so it's so important, to stay ahead of trends like that. And so, you have to constantly have your ear to the ground, listening to what can make your business better. Because if you're trading at a sub three cap and you're paying $350,000 a door, and property tax is rising, payroll is rising, COVID, what's happening, you must look to your income statement for areas of opportunity to increase revenue. So technology is it. I mean, has to be it. Multifamily is not the only space that's participating in this. I think that it will not fully replace a leasing consultant, but I want our teams to have Sundays off to be with their families. I believe that work-life balance encourages retention, and I would argue that I can very easily quantify the negative effects of turnover. And so how do I balance an individual who makes the appropriate amount of income to meet the 3 times rent requirement, but has Sunday off, or a nurse? Nashville is a medical, community. We have a significant healthcare driver here from an economy perspective. We have a lot of nurses. They're great residents. Well, they have atypical schedules. So how does someone that we would love to live with us get information about our facility if we're closed at 5:30? And AI is it. Technology is it. Get on our website. You can go soup to nuts with never speaking to a human being, should you choose. And we have like links that get shot out, video tours. We utilize YouTube, leasing Lisa, or whatever, cute name that our partner has, assists you through the whole prospect. And then, that bleeds right into online leasing. It really can be seamless. And I think that our customer base wants that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and again, you're mentioning other big brands that we experience in the world today outside of the industry. They're training the customers on that expectation for instant and now, and it makes sense. I mean, Elon Musk says that everything in the middle needs to, be optimized, or don't optimize everything in the middle sometimes, right? It's not everything in the middle needs to even exist, and so we're reimagining it, not replacing it. And I love where you're getting the inspiration for that. Just paying attention to the world we're living in, bring it into your business. It
Absolutely.
makes sense. I mean, that's what we are responsible for, making the most out of these investments to keep residents fully engaged in the business of multifamily. Are you seeing, when you're amongst friends or in circles, what are the myths that are being around this idea? What do people think that they don't know, that because you've experienced this, you're talking with results that you have in your portfolio, you're getting the lift. You even mentioned that you would buy another property and just implement this. That could be also a strategy, right?
Yeah.
Where everyone's focused on maybe other things. What are you seeing as some of the myths that can be sort of busted here on this?
One of the big myths that I think I have personally discovered is when AI started partnering with a leasing agentless tour. I, several years ago, flew to DC and piloted a product called Tour 24. This is a app-based Bluetooth walk through an apartment complex, and your phone leads the way. You get a code. It lets you into the controlled access front door. This is very effective for urban communities, or, properties that have like 50 units here, 20 units here. I mean, there's a lot of that in dense urban areas. And then there was this big like safety thing, like, oh, we're letting strangers into the community. You know what I mean? And this technology is like, it's not safe. Right. And I thought, man, in the South, if someone is coming up behind you and you don't open the door for them, I mean, you're rude, right? So you have your fob and you live in this beautiful controlled access community, but that web and flow of human beings coming and going, not to mention the delivery community, Uber Eats, DoorDash, et cetera. These are all people who've never been screened by our front office. And I would argue Marriott, Hilton, they don't do background checks when you move, when you stay the weekend with your family. So I just thought it can't be unsafe. We have to try and put parameters and measurements. And, I think it's a calculated risk, right? But for us, it was great. You know, we didn't have issues. Our customer experience was improved, but it wasn't until someone took that first step and was like, hey, try it, right? Do it. Let this leasing consultant let a tour happen at 3:30 in the afternoon on a Sunday when the front office is closed, and give them access to the model. And it's like, hey, here's the model. You know what I mean? Take a picture of your ID, scan your credit card. There's software that mirrors those two things together. And that has not been an issue. And I think that's growing. Additionally, the multifamily space is a lot of capital is going to this build to rent model, the single family home build to rent. That's getting a lot of attention in our industry. And so, how does a leasing consultant tour 25 single family homes? Well, you can't do it, So there are products like Rently where you just go to Open Door and you go and you type your text message in, you take a photo of your ID, you take a photo of yourself, it sends you a code. Zillow, Redfin, huge real estate companies have figured this out. And if it wasn't working, then it would have stopped, but it isn't stopping, it's growing. And the customer demands it, So that's a big myth that I think has kind of been debunked. And then the second myth, which we've discussed, is technology going to replace the human experience in multifamily? I think it supplements, it makes it better. Our leasing consultants are getting tours automatically put onto their calendar in their CRM from a chatbot. Well, I pay $150 if my leasing consultant closes that deal. Well, man, I mean, doesn't everybody love $150, right? So once you connect those two dots, I think that it enhances the customer experience. It definitely drives traffic. And anyone in our space knows that the more traffic that you have, the more conversions that you have, the more conversions you have, the higher occupancy you have, the higher occupancy you have, the better you can grow rent. And there is no better way to drive NOI than to feed that top line.
Yeah, Kyle, this has been great and refreshing thoughts. And we need to be following some of the things that you're working on. It sounds like we have probably more conversations around the investment side of the business as well. But
Sure.
appreciate you sharing your time with the audience and creating so much value. We've got pages here of notes, so we'll be going
Yeah.
back and we'll be looking forward to seeing what you guys are working on. What's next? Any final thoughts you want to leave our viewers with?
No, I mean, I think that if you're not using some type of technology partner, I would encourage you to start that process. I would encourage you to see what your portfolio needs and then benchmark off of what others are doing. And then it's here to stay. So it is something that I think our end user wants, and we've got to pay attention to it. You don't want to be left behind on this.
Yeah, good words, good thoughts. Well, with that, we'll wrap and we'll see you guys in the next show.
Great. Thank you so much.